What's going on, great people in the world? It's your guy, Nicholas Wilcox. It's your guy to my left, Johnny Main. Welcome to the Fantasy Football Show Week 10 edition. We got your Week 9 reactions, your waiver wire, your trade advice. Man, Johnny, feeling good right now. Feeling real good right now. Versus last week. Last week was this week, man, just things are coming together. Little quick note, 8-0 in all my season-long leagues this past week.
I'll give you a golf clap.
Whew.
Give you a golf clap.
Just throw it around the yard.
I'll give you a golf clap. I'll give you a golf clap. 12 and 3 in my 15. 12 and 3.
Hey, that's good. That's good. That's real good.
Yeah. My Scott Fishbowl team actually even got a win this week. That's how off balance the world was, man. My Scott Fishbowl team, I'm gonna look at it when the year's over with and be like, damn, I drafted really good, and I'm probably gonna be the worst team in the entire freaking division, man.
It's sometimes that just happens that way. It's I don't know. I think if I were to say the worst record I got right now in one of my leagues is 4-5. 4-5, I think, and that's actually the Yahoo League that I'm a commissioner of, which is interesting. But good news is that 8 teams make the playoffs, and I'm right there with y'all. So,
other than my Scott Fishbowl team, I have a 1-8 auction keeper league team with. I'll just read the roster real quick. Yeah, 1-8, half point PPR. Oh yeah. I'm the commissioner of this league, by the way. Kirk Cousins.
What we noticed from week 9 was
Kirk Cousins, Breece Hall, Dave Montgomery, Marvin Harrison really is the one that really hurt me. Marvin Harrison and Breece Hall have they've definitely roasted me. And then Travis Etienne as well. He's another one that hasn't come through for me. Cortland Sutton. And I had Brandon Cooks as my third wide receiver. Dalton Kincaid is my tight end. So, yeah, man, that was a rough one, man. That was my very, very last draft of the season, man. So,
Brandon Cooks though. Oof.
Yeah, he was my third wide receiver, man. I took a stab on.
How'd you get decimated in auction that badly though?
Oof. Well, because my original keepers were Patrick Mahomes, because I had him for $1. So Patrick Mahomes, and then I think Breece Hall might have been $36 or something. The budget was $225, and then I paid up for Cortland. I mean, I paid up for Marvin Harrison Jr. I paid up for ATN, and Montgomery actually I got for the low. So I just picked the wrong players, man. It's just kind of that's what happened. So
it is what it is, my guy. Man. Well, what did you notice from week 9 overall? Besides, you're 1-18.
Yeah, you go ahead and get my little side pocket change ready to go. A couple
spare
notes.
Change. Spare change.
Well, the Saints or the Aints, 2-0 to start the year. Head coach is fired. Michael Thomas is going buck banoodle on X.
That was hilarious.
Loved every moment of that right there.
I love that too.
I would say this right here in the spirit of election day, running backs do matter. Derrick Henry leading the league in all-purpose yardage. Saquon Barkley.
Look, man, we're going to take a victory lap here. It's victory lap moment.
Saquon Barkley. I said it from the jump, bro, about Saquon.
All off-season.
Said it from the jump.
All off-season, yo.
And then even if you think about I was looking at where everybody was at, and even if you take those two guys out of the equation, Josh Jacobs is quietly having a really good year, just not at an elite level like Saquon and Derrick Henry. The other thing for me, man, that's that I noticed in week 9 was that I think the Patriots are going to be all right with Drake May, man. I think they're going to be all right. Whoa, I don't know what he did, but the Pats are going to be all right with Drake May at quarterback for sure in the future. They might not be this year, but I think they got their quarterback. Another thing, I got a few things. Los Angeles Chargers, they are a playoff team for sure, and that makes me feel good about my guys, the Pittsburgh Steelers, being able to pull off a win against them, although Justin Herbert was a little bit banged up when they played. But the Chargers are a playoff team. for sure. And then this isn't like what I noticed, but I'm curious. Antonio Pierce and the Las Vegas Raiders. And I won't say anything other than that, and I'll just leave it there. And will the real Slim Shady please stand up with Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals? Obviously, kind of correlation there. They put the smack down on the Raiders this week for sure. And the Arizona Cardinals, this is how I preface them. They are the ugly girl at the party with a good personality and rich parents. The Arizona Cardinals.
I love that. I love that. That's pretty accurate.
Yeah, and then to keep it in the NFC West, the Rams are the old uncle still at the young party, man. You know what I mean? Like, they still irrelevant there, man. Like, Stafford, Coop Cup. Like, it's wild, man. It's wild and stuff to see. And then last but certainly not least, we've seen it on Monday night, man. The new version with old Chiefs. And when I say that, Kareem Hunt getting his second round at Kansas City, Nook Hopkins, man, just coming out balling, man. Shout out to him, man, for his Remember the Titans end zone dance, man. Those were the things, man, that like I noticed from week 9, man. Just a lot to unpack. But we're halfway through the year, man. So those are some of the things I took away from week 9, man. What were some of your takes?
I think just looking at statistics, like if you told me Garrett Wilson was going to be wide receiver 3 overall heading into week number 10, like I knew it was in the range of outcomes, but it was also not like this where like the Jets are 3-6. They could be easily 6-3, but that's how it kind of goes. Like, but fantasy wise, absolutely killing as Garrett Wilson. But look, here's the kicker. Like, I think this guy like literally has stolen the draft. If you have him, like, because this guy was probably going sometimes undrafted too. Because I know I picked him off the waiver. There's a couple of leagues I have him in. Darnell Mooney, wide receiver 12, yo.
Bad moon.
Are you kidding?
Andre Rising 2K, baby. That's what we should just call him. Rising 2K, man.
12 right now.
Bad Mooney. Yeah, that's wild, bro.
It is wild.
That's wild.
I'm like, are you serious? Yeah. So, yeah. And I got to say this. I told you about Jaden Reed.
Yeah, you did.
Wide receiver 10 right now.
You did.
Going to the moon here. Like, as far as like receivers go, like obviously we told people all season about Henry and Barkley. Told them all off season about these two. And don't sleep. Get yourself a balanced draft if you need to, or grab them both and just grab whatever. But we told people Henry Barkley,
no doubt,
Henry Barkley, and there were some people that were just too good for it. Now, granted, there's been a lot of receiver injuries.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying, so we'll take that into account a little bit. And there's always going to be a little bit of ambiguity going on every year when it comes to season by season, and every season is obviously just going to be a little bit different depending on who's available, who's not there, whatever. But we said Barkley and Henry, you know what I'm saying? They were going at, where they should have gone in most drafts. So
Henry really was the one, man, that was going later than Saquon. Like, I think as the season progressed, like draft season progressed, Saquon started to kind of move up boards, but Henry was really the one. And Henry, if he stays upright, man, he's going to finish his RB1, obviously.
Totally. And last, but surely not damn least, who's an RB8 right now? Who's the RB8 right now?
Oh, this must be a Devon Achane speech coming right now. Yeah.
Well, look, man, I told people like we didn't need Achane to get all these carries in between the tackles. But dare I say, could they be used as a weapon in the passing game? Yes. Hello. Yeah. I can't believe this right now. These people were just calling me crazy, calling me nuts, calling me cuckoo, calling me whatever. It's like this doesn't know what he's talking about. Like, I'm like, okay, all right, give me Achane, give me him.
The best part about all that is, bro, is like I literally have a super flex league where my 3 running backs are Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, and Devon Achane. 7-1.
You're welcome.
8-1 now, actually, but yeah,
You're definitely welcome. And then burning question from last night. Yeah, is a lot of people are circling the wagons. Is D Hop a wide receiver 1? Now, I say he's still a wide receiver 3 because he has some tougher matchups moving forward. He's definitely a rock solid wide receiver 2 if he gets anything like he did last night, though. That's what I learned from week 9. Other things as well, as we'll get into it. But we're going to get right into the buy low and sell highs for week number 10. Man, can you believe we're already here, like more than halfway point of the season? It is nuts.
Listen, the one person that can't be more ecstatic the fact that it's week 10 is Mrs. Johnny Man. It's so ecstatic that it's week 10. She's so ecstatic. I told her that. I was like, you realize, I was like, we're like week 10. She's like, I know, I've been counting the weeks.
Oh, buddy. But yeah, like I know what you mean, man. It's the season's a grind, but I really can't believe we're already here. Like, it's nuts. But in terms of that, like, we are buy low and sell highs for week 10. We're gonna first go over the teams who are on buy. So there's a lot going on here because we need to break this down for people because, like I say, we need to always look to be a week or two ahead of what's happening until at least the postseason. Then it's literally just game by game, moment by moment.
Turns into a DFS tournament, man.
Yeah, it sure does.
Yeah.
Sure does. But bye weeks for week 10, we have the Packers, Seahawks, Raiders, and Browns all on bye for week 10. I put 11 and 12. So 11, we have so 2 weeks from now, Bucks, Giants, Panthers, and the Cardinals. And then week 12, which is a pretty big one for some leagues for sure. It'll be week 12 and week 14. We'll get to that, I'm sure, at a later show. What week 12 is going to be filled with the Saints, Falcons, the Jaguars, the Jets, the Bills, and the Bengals. Big week 12 is definitely going to be a nasty. So I put all this and say this all to say that we need to make sure we are always prepared for injuries and stuff like that, and obviously these bye weeks. So there's going to be some weeks where if you're for example, if you have London and Mooney, we just talked about those guys, are going to be on bye week 12. So have a stable plan in mind, or at least be thinking about it, how that roster is going to look like for you on that week. And try to get prepared for that, whether it be via trade or via the waiver wire, because that's what we want to do. And George Play, of course, our guy is here. Definitely. We're going to get to you in just one moment, my guy. Buy number 1. Check the waivers for this guy, because if you're playing in shallow leagues, he still might be out there. Tyrone Tracy is my first buy number 1 buy. And I think it really becomes like Tyrone Tracy is literally still he's still fresh to the running back position. Can you believe that? The Giants are going to use him in ways that they, are going to feel confident about as far as like how his production goes. Like, he's a guy that even if he feels like a guy that's already matchup proof in my mind. Because just going back to the Pittsburgh game, where he just came out and he had that long run in that game that pads his stats a little bit, but he had 20 carries in that game for 145 yards. It goes back to that game where I feel like I really took Tyrone Tracy more like a guy I would want on my rosters, not only as a startable piece, but just as my running back core. He's a guy that, he gets Carolina this week. So this is your opportunity to buy low on him now, because, last week, just couldn't get going. Washington, we know, is a better run defense than they are pass. They just got Marshawn Lattimore, so that changed a little bit. I know. Washington's going for it, and I respect them for it. I got a couple of Washington fans, and they're all going crazy about it, obviously. I don't blame either. But in terms of schedule, I know Tyrone Tracy has a bye week 11. But he gets Tampa, Dallas, New Orleans before the playoffs. Then gets Baltimore, Atlanta, and then Indianapolis for most people's playoffs. This is just a moving forward. So because I just want Tyrone Tracy on more of my teams than anything else. So definitely check the waivers, but buy number 1, Tyrone Tracy, because of his utilization that he's going to use. He's the RB1 for the New York Giants. Yeah. And their schedule just gets a little bit more easier, especially after their bye. So this is a move that you want to, if you want to win now, And also for the moving forward, this is a good move, I feel. But what do you say, Johnny, to Tyrone Tracy? Anything you want to add in terms of, do you have him a lot? I got a couple of shares of him in some of my leagues. So I'm feeling pretty good about that already. And that's where I stand on him. But what do you have to say about Tyrone Tracy overall?
Well, Tyrone Tracy is actually one of my Scott Fishbowl players, so of course he actually would show up. Yeah, he would actually show up and start the ball. Literally, probably might have the worst Scott Fishbowl team in the history of Scott Fishbowl teams. As I'm still out here trying. But yeah, I think obviously the Pittsburgh game, man. Just over the last 3 weeks, that's the game that really sticks out and really makes him what he is right now. He's over the last 3 weeks, I think he's ranked running back 24 in PPR. So that game right there, he really showed out. But just with Carolina, right? You get the opportunity, that's a get right spot, for everybody for sure. Even though Mushin Muhammad and Jake Delhomme and Steve Smith didn't come out of retirement to win that game on Sunday, but I still
did, yo.
No, they didn't. I was watching that game. I'm like, oh my god, if people were watching that, I probably would get decapitated for it. But either way, Tyrone Tracy, volume is king, right? And he's definitely gonna be getting volume for sure. So I think that's definitely a guy coming down the stretch, right? The second part of the year, you start to see rookies kind of take off. A lot of them don't get a lot of run, or either they have got to run and they run into that wall. But Tyrone Tracy, I just think, running back 2, running back 3, absolutely for sure. I'm in on him.
Makes a ton of sense. It's just probably what I would say that makes sense in terms of what you may want to give up for him. Hopefully, you got in terms of bench pieces, bench stashes, stuff like that. You got to give up something for him. But I wouldn't be I wouldn't go too crazy because it's still the Giants.
they ain't good, man. They ain't good.
The Giants. But just thinking about it, I mean, if someone's gonna take off Kareem Hunt's performance, that's a good one-off, 1v1, because you're getting the guy that should have a lot more production and volume moving forward. And I know Kareem Hunt could still be, for some owners they still want to move off of him, and for some that's they don't. But I think Hunt is a great 1v1. I think Stevenson's an interesting one as well. I also think if you have potentially Pickens, your guy,
man,
potentially a 1v1.
You better stop with George Pickens, man. You better stop with that. You better stop. You better stop. You better stop with that.
I was gonna get right at you on that.
Yeah, I would say some guys that are falling into his category, man. Over just the last 3 weeks, I think if you want to kind of look at it, this is actually kind of crazy. Actually, just looking at it, man. I think Chuba Hubbard, Jonathan Brooks is coming back now, and even just kind of looking him and Tyrone Tracy have been relatively close to the same ballpark over the last 3 weeks. Chuba Hubbard had that big game last week, 21 points. You could look at him. You could look at maybe a Tank Bigsby as well. I know Tank Bigsby didn't really do a lot, and ATN is back. You look at those kind of guys. I would say maybe even potentially, if you really want to, I think this would be an interesting one as far as the running back goes. Maybe Raheem Mostert. That might be a good one to look at, man. I think the Dolphins are, I don't want to say they're out of it, man, but last week was kind of demoralizing for them from that side of things. So, looking at guys just over the last handful of weeks that have put up very similar production to Tyrone Tracy, I think that's kind of where I would kind of look at in that respect. Still guys that are relevant and still guys that can, if they find the end zone, they're going to provide value for you. But I'm kind of looking at those guys, man. When I think about that, when I think about it just from the running back perspective, those are a couple of guys that I'm looking at and thinking about as far as maybe 1v1s you were talking about.
Yeah, fair. I think of a 2-for-1, I think you could get a Downs in there and stuff like that, to kind of make it spicy. But I would be valuing Tyrone Tracy pretty highly at this moment because I know he's definitely a guy that's going to catch passes out the backfield too, along with his carries. So it just makes sense to have him. Like I said, the schedule wise, I think it's just one of those players that you just want to buy on right now, so that you have something like that moving
He's going to be out. He's going to be out on the field for sure. Like, there's no doubt about that.
Definitely. But George Play, we got your question right now. My guy, they lost this week, unfortunately. That sucks. I had Saquon, Gibbs, Gesicki, and JSN in my lineup. My rival made the most points of the season this week. That's unfortunate. That's really unfortunate.
That is.
I wonder who I'm curious now who he had in his lineup then, because man, Gesicki went off, JSN went off, like Saquon went off.
He probably, if I had to be a betting man, he was probably going against Jalen Hurts, Cedric Tillman.
Cedric Tillman had a decent week, but
yeah, I'm just throwing out some random guesses.
Gesicki had a monster week though.
Yeah, Gesicki did. I think this is just a standard league.
It's standard league, but still,
maybe going against Lamar. Maybe
I'd be curious to know George.
Lamar and Zay Flowers, probably. Yeah, I would say something maybe like that. Right?
I mean, it had to have Zay Flowers.
Yeah,
probably.
Yeah,
it had to be Zay Flowers at least.
Yeah, that's rough, man. That's rough.
Definitely rough. I don't know. Maybe you had to have Burrow in there too, because
there you go, Burrow. Yeah. Well, I think from the quarterback position, you can kind of think about
it. Maybe Kelsey. I don't know. That's anyway. That's that really sucks. But George, if you got any other questions for us, let us know in the chat, my guy.
Garrett Wilson, D Hop, Zay Flowers, kind of. So probably something along those lines. But
definitely possible. That's that's really unfortunate. I had some of the guys that George Play actually had won me my leagues. My weeks this
week. I lost, man. One league because I had to set JSN for Cedric Tillman, man, and that ended up costing me.
Damn, that's rough.
Yeah.
The draft night out league that we're in, I went sick. I had JSN and Gesicki on that team and Saquon on that team.
Jalen Hurts and Derrick Henry, baby. You know what it is, man. You know what it is. You know what it is.
Coming for that spot. You and I have to be in that championship game at least. You can't have Colin in there. He keeps on skating by, yo.
No. Yeah, man. That's my only loss of the year is to that cat, man. That's it. That's my only loss.
Keeps on skating by. We got off track, of course. But listen. Alert, yo. Like warning. Warning. Listen, this is probably the last time in terms of some of these stud running backs you could trade for. Honestly, Hall, Kyron, Walker, K9, Kenneth Walker, Bijan Robinson. All these guys right here, this is probably your last opportunity to buy on. I think in terms of, because look, Kyron, no more bye week for him. Walker on the bye week now. And then Bijan and Hall both of them have week 12 buys, I believe. I think because of Falcon. Yeah, both of them have week 12 buys. Look, man, like Bijan has too great of a schedule down the stretch. People are concerned about Breece Hall. I'm not. It's only because like Breece Hall is one of those guys that the usage is still there for Hall. I just know production wise, it hasn't been as a cleanest bumpy ride, cleanest ride. But I know it hasn't been he just hasn't scored the touchdowns. There hasn't been as much involved in the passing game. But I'm just not concerned if you got someone that's concerned about Breece Hall or. You got a team that's lower in the standings right now and need a win. I would do what it takes to acquire Breece Hall right now, because I feel like just better days are coming. The Jets schedule gets a little bit more easier in terms of strength of schedule, and honestly, I just think there are better days for Breece Hall. And he's too good of a back to not be this good moving forward. And this is money time. You want guys that if people are concerned about Breece Hall right now. Make sure you're looking forward towards the playoffs. Kyron, like I talked about before, he didn't score a touchdown for the first time
since my kids were born.
Since mid last season, it feels like. Because he had scored constant, he had scored a touchdown constantly. At least going back to, like I said, dating back to last year where he didn't have a touchdown. But yeah, look, you want a guy like Kyron because we all know he's gonna be, having the workload. Clearly. He hasn't had He's only had 2 games. Well, technically 1 game where he's had 15 or less carries, and that dates back to week 2. He's had at least 15 carries or more every game this season. And like
You
as
talking
well,
about
okay,
talking about
Kyron.
Brees? Oh,
Talking
Kyron.
about
Yeah.
Kyron. Talking about Kyron
Yeah.
Williams. Like,
Yeah.
I think the best time to buy low now because he hasn't had, he didn't have like a top 10 performance this week.
Yeah.
So Kyron's I would say he's a great buy low at the moment. Then, because he gets Miami on Monday night with over under is already crazy, sickly. Like a fit over 50 and a half right now is over under. That game's gonna be crazy, I think. But Kyron's definitely a guy I want to buy low now because he's probably more up my ladder. Because the bye week's over for him. He doesn't get another bye week. But Bijan's someone like, look, everyone's concerned about Tyler Algier. Everyone's so concerned about that. But Bijan has really carried the load the last 3 weeks of the season. Last 3 matches of the season, he's had 19, 13, 21 the last 3 weeks in terms of carries. And he's starting to just look like the guy that we drafted, the guy that's starting to look like the workhorse, the guy that's looking like the feature back. And back-to-back games, at least 7 catches. Like, that's big for this team. And like I said, he gets a decent schedule for the playoffs. Vegas week 15, the Giants week 16, and then Washington week 17 for the championship games. And then Kenneth Walker, same thing. Seattle is going to keep on throwing the football, I believe. But that just opens up things for Walker. I think people concerned or coming into the year for Kenneth Walker was he going to actually be catching passes out the backfield, and can we get excited about that? And he's looked like that part. It's just going to be more about, like, I think when Metcalf comes back, the offense gets even more better, and Kenneth Walker gets back into a role where he starts, again, dominating touches like he always has, but it becomes a lot more easier when you have a guy like DK Metcalf. So Walker probably is a really decent buy low out of all the running backs here. You could probably get him probably the cheapest in my opinion. Anything else you want to say about these running backs? And like I said, people, warning. This is your last chance to get these guys, literally. Like, I feel.
I think like Brees Hall, man. Like I have him in a couple leagues, and he's still been getting you double-digit fantasy points, right? Like you mentioned, but like coming like over the next handful of weeks, like he's got the Cardinals, the Colts, Seahawks, Dolphins, Jags, and Rams. So like if you can get there with him as far as the playoffs, I think like you'll be fine. And even for where you drafted him at, like right now over the last 3 weeks, he's been running back 16. Which isn't exactly where we want him to be for sure. But still, though, like you've probably still survived and maintained. Same thing with the Seahawks, man, and Ken Walker. Like you have the 49ers, you got the Cardinals, the Jets, and and you got the Cardinals again, the Packers, and the Vikings. So not as soft of a schedule as Brees coming down the stretch, but still one that like is definitely. You can definitely do some positive things. And he's been running back 18 over the last 3 weeks as well. Like him and Brees are only really separated by like 1 point. So I think like when you get to this point in time in the year, like when running backs kind of start to slow down a little bit, right? Like we got to remember these guys are pros. They're elite. Like they're the best in the world at what it is that they do. So I feel like, there's definitely some big games going on. And I think to your point, like, I like both of these guys, but there's just something about Ken Walker in this offense. And obviously DK is out right now. But like I think I think Ken Walker might have an opportunity to do a little bit more than Brees Hall might coming down the stretch just because the way the offense is for the Seattle Seahawks. But these are absolutely 2 guys that I would absolutely try to buy. And Bijan, man, like Bijan over the last 3 weeks, dude, running back 3, which is exactly right in that ballpark is where we wanted him to be, for sure from a production standpoint. 3 weeks in a row over 20 points, man, in fantasy for PPR leagues, man. So like that's money right there, right? So I think like you're in a really good place. And Kyron Williams, man, when we talk about him, I'm looking at Kyron Walker here on the screen. Kyron, when we look at him, right, like the Rams are starting to get healthy. It's really been like obviously the Puka punch last week Obviously, he got ejected from the game, but Demarcus Robinson came through strong. Like I said, man, like the Rams are like the old uncle at the young party, man. Like they're still relevant. They're still gonna do their thing, man. So I feel good about this list of running backs. So if you have the opportunity to buy any of these guys right now, I think you absolutely need to cash in. I think the only problem you run into, in my opinion, right, is with a guy like Bijan, the owner is finally like, oh my God, man, like the guy is starting to crank it up a little bit. I think you have a better chance to hit with Brees, Kyron, and K9 as opposed to Bijan. But hey, man, if you can pull off Bijan, go for it.
Yeah, I think it's just these are just the last opportunities to buy because I feel like I said, bye weeks coming up and everything. I think it only gets more trickier to try to get guys like this as the season moves along and as trade deadlines for your league start coming around too. Like this is the opportunity to kind of be like, all right, I gotta get my rosters in order to like make sure that I got my depth in order, I got the right studs, especially for the playoff schedule. There's a lot to love when it comes to these guys, but just make sure you're getting, at least one of these guys, trading for one of these guys.
Those some trade offers out there,
and
man.
just go crazy.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? What do you have to lose? Nothing. Nothing at all. Buy number 3, Brian Thomas Jr. I think it's one of those situations where, man, we know the Jags are a bad team, but Brian Thomas, like, he's just been absolutely killing it. Like, I didn't see this coming. I knew there was some type of he would be some type of playmaker for this team and whatnot.
Right.
But I didn't expect this. 17 yards per catch and 5 touchdowns on a year is crazy. And I don't know Christian Kirk. I know Thomas is coming off a 2-catch, 22-yard game, and that's his worst of the season. But this is why he's buy low right now, people.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just who besides Brian Thomas and besides maybe Evan Ingram, like, this is the offense. Getting a guy like Brian Thomas, like right now, I know that a bye week comes in a couple weeks for Brian Thomas, but he's someone that I think that in terms of we know what he is. He's a deep play alpha. He's wide receiver 11 on the year. And it just, he's averaging 14 points per, fancy 14 fancy points per game. So with Brian Thomas, we know we have an alpha receiver. And I know the matchup for the playoffs isn't as friendly because, week 14, Tennessee, week 15, the Jets, week 16, Vegas. So that's a little bit more softer. Week 17 again with Tennessee. But we all know that Brian Thomas is still going to get the targets. He's still going to get, he's going to be the guy that's the deep threat shot. So he's someone I could definitely buy for now too, because they get Minnesota this week. You get Detroit the next week. So easily 2 defenses that let up the pass a little too much. So Brian Thomas is a distant third versus the other 2 guys. But I feel with Brian Thomas, you're getting a guy that he's still a rookie, and new rookies only get better. So if he's been doing it pretty much all year long, I can only imagine what the final statistics are going to be for the end of the year for Brian Thomas. But what do you have to say, Johnny, to this?
Man, I'm not shocked, but I think just his draft season kind of progressed, his draft value started to rise because there were some people that were saying that they thought that Brian Thomas could have been better than Malik Neighbors. It's just that his personality wasn't as alpha-ish and wasn't as demanding and demonstrative when he wasn't getting the football. So I think this is one of those situations, right, where I don't want to put this kind of weight on him, but it feels like very Justin Jefferson-ish is what it feels like, right? Like this is a really talented wide receiver in an offense that wants to throw the football. And it's a guy that maybe when we look forward to next year, he's going to be probably a 3rd, 4th round pick, probably, right? So coming from wide receiver it doesn't surprise me at all, aka LSU. And you're right,
he actually reminds me of Jamar Chase versus Jefferson. But I can understand what you're saying.
Yeah. You dig what I'm saying? As far as being all right, this guy could be really, really good, but we just don't know. Oh shit, he's really, really, really good, actually. So I think right, I think you nailed it, man. Right now is definitely the best time if you're going to get him. And he had a down week, 6.2 fantasy points. But even still, over the last 3 weeks, man, just kind of like as a benchmark for me, wide receiver 14. So like that's, I think you said he was what was he at for the year as wide receiver? Wide receiver what for the year?
Wide receiver 11 on the year.
Yeah, so like, all right, so like mostly due to that performance that he had, but like also too, like that like I don't want to. Oh, I'll go ahead and say it. Doug Peterson, it's coming. It's coming. It's coming. Right. So like eventually, whoever gets that job, Brian Thomas is going to be featured, and like he's definitely going to be featured now with no Christian Kirk, and Evan Ingram's getting a little bit longer in the tooth. So I think like this is one of those situations. That I think is really interesting, and people really need to pay a lot of attention to as far as like what they have and what they don't have. They just paid Trevor Lawrence, so obviously Trevor Lawrence has got his guy for the next handful of years. So yeah, I'm all in on buying Brian Thomas, man, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I would say based on like trade value wise, like man, who would you say would you give up for Brian Thomas if you're acquiring him right now? Like where do you feel like he falls right now, and then what would you give up for him?
Oh man. I think Brian Thomas for like George Pickens is interesting right now. I know it seems like that's always the topic of my conversation. But I think that's interesting, man, just because I think you're looking at two players that are actually on the rise. And then I think if you look at Brian Thomas and maybe an Alvin Kamara, maybe, I think that's interesting. I think Brian Thomas
straight up Kamara for straight up Brian Thomas.
No, I'm just like looking at players that are like right around like in that ballpark, right? Like just to kind of build off of, because I think we're at a place too where like waivers are going to hit tomorrow, which we'll talk about. Like you can start like throwing in like some extra pieces in there, because like the other thing, like with the Saints, right? It's like we don't know what their offense is going to look like, right? And like a lot of times when these guys get into these interim head coach positions, they're wanting to try to show people that like obviously they should have a head coaching job. So like smart head coaches are going to say, in my opinion, smart head coaches, smart OCs are going to be like, hey, how do we scheme up ways to be able to get our best players the ball? And then in turn, as fantasy managers, like we're looking at volume, potentially with no Chris Olave next week. Like it feels like Alvin Kamara would be in for like a heavy workload in the passing game and in the running game as well. So like that's why like he's somebody that kind of pops for me. And like I said, like with George Pickens, it's obvious. And I'll talk about it just kind of real quick on a high level. Like their schedule, the Steelers' schedule coming up, like they're going to be in some games that have potential shootout capability. When you talk about Cincy, when you talk about Baltimore, when you talk about the Commanders. So those are things that like I'm looking at like from my perspective. And then I don't know, man. Maybe like I don't know, man. Maybe this is gonna sound crazy to say, but even like a Ramondre Stevenson, right? The last 2 weeks back-to-back 20-point games. Those are depending on your format PPR, right? Those are things that like players, situations that I'm kind of looking at is like, what does this look like over the last 3 weeks? Because like we're at a place now where what you did back in week 1 and week 2 doesn't really hold a lot of merit and hold a lot of value. I'm really looking at things in a 3 to 4 week increment in terms of value and where people have been ranking at.
Yeah, fair. I mean, ranking games always interesting.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's always interesting.
Yeah.
But I would say, yeah. I mean, look, like I think Brian Thomas, like he has like. I think George Pickens straight up would be interesting for him for sure. When I look at like trade value, I think Brian Thomas could probably be like straight up. I'd look to see if I had Aaron Jones, I'd probably trade him for that.
Yeah,
Potentially.
Yeah, I can see that.
Potentially Swift, if some people still think that DeAndre Swift's a thing. Excuse me, based on his production the last few weeks. And try to sell him at that point.
18 points and 14 points the last 2 weeks, man. So like he's still hitting the mark, man.
Yeah, I mean he is for the moment, but we'll have to see how that goes. But yeah, I mean I think Brian Thomas is just a smart like trade for the moment. I think you can still get him for something that's like I think there's gonna be some people that probably view Brian Thomas as a bad offense and a Jaguar or stuff like that. But it's like you're trying to grab a guy that's going to elevate your roster for later on. And I think
let me throw one at you. Let me throw one at you.
What's that?
Brian Robinson for Brian
Thomas.
Yeah.
Straight up, I would do that.
All right, dig that. Yeah, I think like I'd be in for that. I'd be in for that right there for sure.
Especially if you gotta find a team. Hey, I need a receiver. Hey, you need a running back. Hey, I got Brian Thomas for you. I got Brian Thomas for you. All right, cool, perfect.
Brian.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Extra buys. Spicy because I said CeeDee Lamb because I mean, look, if you have CeeDee Lamb, I have no problem with you trying to sell high right now. No problem with it. But for me, I don't have CeeDee Lamb in my league, so I am trying to buy him.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where the AC sprain should be fine. He should be playing this week, but crazier things have happened. But now no Dak Prescott, he's on the IR, officially. So that's just not good for the prospects. The good news is that Dak Prescott would be back at a timeline where be right around our fantasy playoffs. So if they were still potentially in the hunt somehow, some way, whatever, and Dak Prescott found himself to get himself back, they're cool. I think CeeDee Lamb is a buy, but he's also a sell because depending on the position you're in, I think you can still get a ton of name value for CeeDee Lamb as well.
100%.
Just based on what he has been in the past, in terms of his production. So you can still get yourself some great depth if you have CeeDee Lamb. But if you're looking to buy for CeeDee Lamb, it makes sense to give up something, but not something that's like, I'm not buying extremely high. I'm like mid buying. So it's like, because I just think Cooper Rush, he does have a little bit of familiarity with Dallas in general. So it's not like it's going to be his first time coming in all cold or whatever. It'd be interesting to see if Trey Lance comes.
Yeah.
I don't know about that. But CeeDee Lamb's definitely a buy. Other guys on this list, Nick Chubb is actually a buy here because, I think where the Browns are looking like a decent, competent offense, I think this is a year where Chubb can still rehab some of his value all across the board. And if he starts looking like Nick Chubb of old, look out, especially if you have him for your playoffs. So I just think there'll be a decent games where Nick Chubb has also gotten some some touches out the backfield in terms of catches. So he's starting to look like a different version of Nick Chubb in a way too, where it was like he wasn't getting catches out the backfield before. So along some of these other names, they're definitely like more derper. Like Reed is not really a buy per se, because of what he kind of just went off this past week again. Nico's been on this list for a couple of weeks, so I hope people have been listening to that. And then I'll let you take it away, John. What else you see on here? I think I put Walker on there, but I should have took him out.
Yeah, I mean, like for me, guys that I think like are buys. I think Devo's definitely a very interesting buy for sure, especially with McCaffrey. Yeah, especially with McCaffrey coming back. I definitely like that. Depending on McCaffrey's health, obviously, I think like Devo is the guy that gets like he gets like I told somebody this like probably like 2 or 3 years ago. Like I've had a couple of favorite non-Steeler players. Cam Newton back in his day with Carolina was like one of my favorite non-Steeler players. Okay. Deebo Samuel absolutely is one of my favorite non-Steeler players. The fact that they were talking about him on draft night, I literally almost pissed my pants. Literally almost pissed my pants in excitement. And then they were
he's like your newer version of Hines Ward. You know what I'm saying?
Oh my God, dude. And then they were like, oh no, it's Ayuk. I'm like, dude, y'all can keep Ayuk, man. Give me Deebo. So like I think like he's a great candidate as far as buying for sure. And I think CeeDee Lamb is interesting just because I think we've seen this situation before where backup quarterbacks come in and like what's the one thing that they're going to do? They're going to get the ball to their best player. And CeeDee Lamb absolutely is their best player. And they're going to force feed it to him. And you're right. Like with an AC joint with a wide receiver, I think it's a little bit easier to navigate because wide receivers have an ability, or I shouldn't say have an ability, but they have a knack for not taking big hits a lot. Getting down, getting out of bounds or whatever. So I still think like, you might actually be able to get CeeDee Lamb for the right package because people are scared of injury and people are scared of the quarterback situation right now that they have going on. So like that one I definitely buy. And I think Jalen Waddle's interesting for me on this list just because he's probably going to be the touchdown at the end of the game. Man, I'm like, damn. But like you can probably get him for close to nothing like at this point just because of the production piece. And I think like when you look at some of the other names on here, Malik Neighbors started off incredibly hot, had injuries and like, necessarily hasn't set the world on fire, didn't set the world on fire this week. I think pretty like, par for the run, par for the course, if you will. And Aaron Jones, man, like I don't want to keep like bashing the guy. We're halfway through the season. I got to get over myself. But like, if you need another running back, man, I guess you could go ahead and make. I'm being real. Like I got to get over myself. Like I literally, I stayed away from him, but there were moments like closer to the end of draft season where I thought, well, what if I'm wrong? And I was like, no, I'm not going to be wrong. He's old and he's going to be hurt. But like my guys on this list for sure they're definitely Debo, definitely CD Lamb, for sure. And like I said, for the low, man, give me Jalen Waddle for the low, man. I'm all in on wide receivers coming back on the second part of the year.
I think Waddle is a very interesting case because everyone's kind of like, it's been how many weeks now? You know what I'm saying? I drafted, most likely you drafted Waddle late second, early third round. You know what I'm saying? And again, another player I stayed away from because not only did he burn me the year prior, but it was always doing some type of injury, knick-knack throughout the game, and I just couldn't deal with the stress.
Well, like, man, but like I always say, man, like I talk about it on Sunday morning, man, like when our DFS session, right? Like, it can't be all of these guys. And the fact that like Tyreek, Waddle, and HN were all going essentially in the first 3 rounds, like there's I said it, you remember back in Ohio, I kept telling you, there's only one football, and it's not going to be all 3 of these guys. It just physically can't be.
But
and
I think the pecking order, the pecking order has even changed. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. It's Tyreek, it's HN, and then it's Jonnu Smith now taking some of that work from Waddle. So that's where I'm like, now it's even, he's definitely a buy, but he's a very, a cautious buy.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because you don't want to give up too much of your roster, any, like a too big of an asset to acquire Waddle. Like I'm in a keeper league last week and I was trying to inquire about Waddle. The guy wanted a 2nd round pick and I was like, no way. What? Waddle hasn't done anything.
Hey man, this reminds me of The Wire right here. Red top, got that red top.
Oh my gosh. Oh my god. I'm just saying, like, it's like, just like, bro, like, stop. You need to sell low if you have Waddle. Yeah. But that's what I'll say. But now it even looks even worse now because he had a game against Buffalo that wasn't great. So I mean, I'm looking to grab Waddle, but it's not like for like a a piece or 2 that I'm like, all right, well, if I have an expiring piece, so to speak, with like Hunt or Hubbard, maybe just straight up to get something back. But yeah, I mean, look, obviously Nico, I put him on this list for a couple of weeks because people you should have gotten Nico by now.
Man, that guy's a superstar.
If you haven't already. So
he's a superstar.
You're missing out if you didn't get Nico. It's probably your last opportunity to do so before the games because Houston, Detroit should be a lot of points in that game this Sunday night. But it should be interesting as well. I'm gonna agree with you on Debo, obviously, because Debo usually isn't a guy that I'm like usually on a lot. Just this year, I felt a little different. I was like, let me grab Debo because look, a couple of things were happening, right? Like we knew CMC, like if there was gonna be a situation where he was gonna be out, like he'd have some run at running back here and there, give him a couple carries here and there, stuff like that, give him some touches with the ball. But also now with Ayuk out, it's like Debo does masterful things without Ayuk in the lineup. Just dating back to last year too, where he came down the stretch and he had a stretch of like 6 total touchdowns and like throughout the playoffs.
He was a dog.
You want to grab a guy like Debo, especially coming to him off the bye. So definitely guys that we should be targeting. Sell highs now. We get to sell highs. First one. The community, I think, is back and forth on this guy a little bit. And even before his last week's performance, I was feeling like, maybe I should. But this is Zay Flowers. Like, Zay Flowers he came out and balled, Like, he was like, remember the name.
Yeah.
Zay Flowers came out and said, remember my name.
Yeah.
Literally, like, he was it was definitely a top 3 finish, right?
Oh, bro, easy. The last, let me see. Dude, the last,
so he was wide receiver 3 overall.
Yeah, I was about to say.
JSN was number 1.
Yeah, almost 30 points, bro. And that's the thing with him, man. I know he's a sell high guy for us.
Yeah.
But I think it's one of those questions we all have to ask ourselves: is it sell high or is it Lamar Jackson making shit happen? And as he's making things happen, Zay Flowers is the beneficiary of that because it used to be Mark Andrews. So now it seems like it's Zay Flowers, right? So I think this one right here, man, is I know it's obviously hot takey for me coming from the standard is the standard here.
Yeah,
but
I'm about to say what?
Yeah, I'm not
John I'm talking to.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's me. It's me.
Is
it's
John
me.
I'm talking to tonight? I don't know if I'm talking to him.
Yeah, so I mean, I think he could go either way, man. Sell high.
He is one of those.
But man, he the last couple of weeks, it's been kind of hard to ignore. And the reason why I'm paying extra close attention is obviously because we got 2 dates with these guys, and I'm looking and I'm like, man, he looks pretty good. But I do think you can't bank on him every single week, zigging and zagging through 6 different defenders to get to the end zone. But the way this Baltimore offense is set up and for what they give up on the back end, I think there's going to be an opportunity for the Ravens to be able to score a lot of points. So you can sell high, and I think you should be able to get something back relatively nice in return.
You better.
You should be able to get something nice because at the end of the day, man, last 3 weeks, man, wide receiver 7, and that's including a 4. That's right, a 4-point performance for him back in week 7, and he's still a top 7 wide receiver. So
Tampa Bay they didn't need him because of but this is also my point.
Either he's about to be a league winner, or either somebody's about to get ready to get a haul for him.
No, I mean, there's a lot of things to consider here. That's why it's the hot take here to sell high, because I know he's looked good the last couple of weeks. And he's looked pretty decent throughout the whole week. But my problem is wide receiver 9 overall. You know what I'm saying? The problem I have with Zay Flowers is, let's just face it, Baltimore has been in a lot of high scoring games this year too.
To my point,
and as it gets, first of all, there's a lot of factors to consider, right? As it gets colder, right? The run game's going to increase a little bit more, even more. They're going to lean on Derrick Henry a little bit more. You know what I'm saying? There's also other weapons in this offense. They just traded for Deontay Johnson, who's mostly going to take some of those snap shares away. So Zay Flowers is going to purely be a burner or a boundary receiver. Remains to be seen. There's a lot of still other things I think people are not putting together here to where it's because Zay Flowers is still, he's still a real decent player. It's just, again, the consistency I need moving forward, and back-to-back games of at least doing really well over 100 yards. But now with Deontay Johnson in town, there's other guys who start to feed in this offense. Again, the weather's gonna get a little bit more colder. There's a lot. The bye week is still coming.
That's one thing.
So there's. I had you until the bye week, bro. Damn.
I think this is the thing, right? Like I just said, dude. Bro, Deontay Johnson, he did not catch a pass.
Well, there was a report that came out later, earlier Sunday, saying that he was only going to take maybe 10, 15 snaps at the most. So he wasn't going to play a lot.
But even still, right? Even for as spread out as that offense has been over the last handful of years, one thing that has been the last 2 years, the one thing that has been consistent is Zay Flowers has been a component of that offense. His ADOT hadn't been very high, but he's still been somebody that they have schemed up to get the football. And so for me,
you're not worried about Deontay Johnson at all then?
I'm not saying I'm not worried about him, but I still think that if you drafted Zay Flowers, right? Zay Flowers as a wide receiver 2 or 3 to give you wide receiver 7 production over the last 3 weeks, obviously you're going to take that, man. And I think that's my point. But Mark Andrews was the guy. He was the guy in this offense, and now he's about maybe 50% snap share, here and there. Zay Flowers is the guy now, man. He's the guy. Derrick Henry is obviously the runner, but Zay Flowers is the guy in this offense. So he's going to get you your PPR points. If he's like if he's going to make people miss, because now, like you think about, like just from a schematic standpoint, teams are now having to bring extra guys down in the box to be able to stop Derrick Henry. So Zay Flowers, one of his calling cards has been him in short range, one-on-one, et cetera, et cetera. And so, and Lamar Jackson, broken plays, et cetera. Like for Zay Flowers, like you're seeing it, man. So like, I don't necessarily know if he's like a sell high. I think he's more of a hold and wait, but I could see why you would be able to say, man, like, let me see what I could get for him. Because like if you, I'll be dramatic, obviously, as I always am. But like, if you say Zay Flowers and something else, and then trying to get potentially into like, I would say like maybe like I want to say Joe, like maybe a Joe Mixon, or maybe to your point, your Kyron Williams, right? Or even
Amon Ross.
Like you could, like you could like Ramondre, like you can get in. Even shit, Rashad White, man, who's now all of a sudden like back to like producing at a high level. I think there's some interesting pieces you can get for Zay Flowers, but I just think, man, sometimes like we just got to trust our eyes and see what we're seeing. And I think, man, Zay Flowers he's been on one the last couple of weeks, bro.
Totally. I'm not telling you to sell Zay Flowers for a ham sandwich.
Oh God.
So, I'm just saying. I think Zay Flowers is one of those players that, you know, it can go one way or another, obviously. But either way, you would be, you know, if you get a good enough offer, you'd be winning no matter what. So that's where I'm coming from in terms of Zay Flowers, because it's like, it's definitely not a solo moment, because look what he's done the last couple games. It's just more about like, I'm just intrigued now with the bye week coming up in a couple of weeks. There's some tougher matchups coming where that might not be as high scoring moments. The Ravens could be leaning a little bit more on the run in these next couple of games. You know, Cincinnati, they play on Thursday night. That's probably going to be more of, again, another shootout. But in terms of after that, it's Pittsburgh after that. It's the Chargers. It's Philly, the bye week. For the playoffs, the Giants, Pittsburgh. So it's a mixed bag a little bit for schedule purposes. But it's like, I mean, look, I'm not telling you to, you know, sell actively, but it's someone where it's like, I know if I get a good enough offer, I could sell up the point of Zay Flowers being a wide receiver 9 when it comes to production so far this season. I could sell that and be like, look, Zay Flowers just been killing it. So I can always sell that up and get if I need some depth, or if I'm in position where I have to sell Zay Flowers, it's like grab, look, like this is what I got, because, this is, here it is. So, but that's where I'm at with it. But in terms of, I agree with your points in terms of like, this is more of a hold than a sell. I can understand that, but it's also in leagues where we're constantly trying to get our teams better. Like I said, I always ask the question to my rosters: is this team good enough to win the championship right now? Is it good enough? Is it good enough? Is it good enough?
Well,
and sometimes I say no. And other times I'm like, well, hell yeah, it is. Let's ride. So that's where I think we'll always have to keep on evaluating that over and over again, like throughout the year, because you're not playing for second place. There's only one winner in your leagues. So, J.K. Dobbins, next sell. And this is because we know we had a little bit of a nice run with Dobbins earlier on in the year, when the Chargers were more run heavy. Now, since after the bye week, and I said this before, they're more pass heavy now. Herbert's come out and just been slinging the football. And that's just bad news for Dobbins. I know last week, 14 carries, 85 yards, and 2 scores. And then he had 2 catches, 20 yards for Dobbins. I think Dobbins he could still be a productive piece for you moving forward. But I still think he's a sell, because as much as, he's been pretty productive, he hasn't before this past week against Cleveland. He'd been more middle of the pack when it comes to production. Like, he hadn't before this past game. He really didn't have a big running game since week 6 against Denver. So that's kind of like where, like, Dobbins is one of those guys where, I mean, if you have Dobbins, you better make sure you have Vidal. Just in case. And we're all of a sudden we're waiting. We said earlier on where Dobbins is hurt all the time, this, then, the third, whatever. But it hasn't happened yet.
No, it hasn't.
So it's where it's like running backs are still at a premium right now, as much as for terms of it hasn't been as many running back injuries so far this year.
You just cursed every
so-
single running back in the NFL for next week. Like some running,
listening.
yeah.
But in terms of that, like Dobbins has been really looking like nice. But in terms, I have a team of, I got too many running backs. I want to trade J.K. Dobbins and somebody else to upgrade. I think J.K. Dobbins is one of those pieces where I could put in a 2-for-1, I could put in a 2-for-3, and be like, all right, like I'm gonna put J.K. Dobbins and somebody else, a receiver, for getting an upgrade or getting more depth. Is probably where I would play it. What are your thoughts on J.K. so far this season? He has a decent, playoff schedule wise. Tampa Bay, Denver, New England. You know what I'm saying? So it is a pretty solid fantasy schedule,
2 out of
playoff
3.
schedule
I'll
as
take
well.
2 out of
So
3.
right.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts? Where are you landing with this?
I have 0 shares of J.K. Dobbins, mostly because I didn't subscribe to him being able to stay healthy.
One of those flyer things, just took a flyer. Why not?
Yeah, man. Yeah, but like I'm always somebody that's always more interested in the younger guys. Like, I've got like
Fair.
probably so much Ray Davis I could vomit right now.
Like, come on.
Yeah, no, it's not a bad thing, but like, I just don't have a lot of J.K. I don't have any J.K. Dobbins. So like for me, it's one of those places where like sometimes I can have blind spots just like any fantasy manager. And I definitely have a blind spot for J.K. Dobbins. Number one, the fact that he played with the Ratbirds, and number two, like obviously his injury history. But again, like we look at him over the last 3 weeks, he's a running back 1 for sure. And that was a big performance for him. So like, I agree, man. Like, I think like he's a guy that like I would feel comfortable with on a sell high piece, right? Because you don't know what's going to happen coming down the stretch. And like, you don't play scared, man. Like you don't play like based off of injury, right? So like if we look at it, like his performance has been really good, but like, it's just the opportunity now that like you could potentially look to package up a J.K. Dobbins and something else to try to see if you could get up to a CD Lamb. Totally. Maybe, right? Maybe because like, hey, like he's obviously produced from that perspective. So or even like a J.K. Dobbins and like, we talked about like a Nico Collins and, potentially something else. Like I'd be interested in something like that. So J.K., I can agree with you, man. I think like this is definitely like a selling point. But the Chargers are a playoff team. And I think at the heart of everything, Jim Harbaugh does want to run the football. He wants to run the football. So I still think there's a place for him and he's still going to have some relevance as far as like, from a fantasy perspective, but it's just a matter of like, A, is he able to stay upright? And B, like you said, what'd you say? New England, Denver, and Tampa Bay in some order.
Tampa Bay, Denver, New England. Yep.
Yeah, so like I think like Denver's still a really good defense, man. I just don't think a lot of people have a lot of answers for Baltimore. But New England and Tampa Bay, I think there's definitely some opportunities down the stretch for him to be really, really explosive. And like again, man, like not to revisit back in August, but where you drafted him at, if your roster construction suggests that he's your running back 3, man, you're doing pretty damn.
Most likely.
You know what I mean? But right. But like you're probably doing pretty damn good, man. So I think to what Nick said, like it's just a matter of like how your roster is constructed, right? Like if you have 2 other running backs that like you can get away with, then like yeah, obviously you want to move J.K. Dobbins. But like, hey, like if he's your RB1 and like you've been rolling with Dobbins and Jordan Mason or Dobbins and I don't know, man. Najee Harris or something like that right there. Like maybe you want to hang on to him, man. So
I get it. But yeah, Dobbins is one of those pieces where you want to package him up with something else and try to upgrade, or if he's got a 2-for-3 trade, try to get more depth out of it. Like makes sense to try to sneakily put him in a trade because he's been that decent this year. And seeing what sticks. Last sell is going to be a little bit more tougher to do in some cases. But obviously, Jackson Smith and Jigba.
JSN.
I mean, finally, can we say finally? Because I've been
The Rock has come back to Tacoma.
Whoa. We don't want to get copyright infringement here.
Listen, we got to have more viewers to get copyright infringement.
Yeah. We're working on that, but good point. But JSN had his best year, best game of the season so far. The second best game was back in week 2 against New England, where he had 12 catches. For 16 targets for 117 yards. This time around, 7 catches, 180 yards.
Balling out
on 13 targets with 2 touchdowns, and obviously he had a couple of deep bombs in that game, courtesy of Geno Smith. So, what do you do with JSN now, right? Because he hasn't been consistent. Metcalf's been missing last couple of weeks because of injury. Metcalf should be back after Seattle gets the bye. If you have JSN and he's on bye, it's like, man, it sucks. It's just your opportunity to make sure you try to get something out of JSN's previous performance and just look to get out. There are some scenarios where you could just stay rocking, but just temper expectations because again, something like that may not happen the rest of the year, maybe not. But yeah, like JSN's production has been a little bit all over the place. He's more like a rock star wide receiver 3 because he hasn't been that wide receiver 2. But yeah, I mean, look, with Geno Smith constantly throwing the football, he still leads the league in pass attempts.
I know, dude.
You know what I'm saying?
That shit earlier,
it's definitely wild.
Just like we drew it up.
This was definitely in the range of outcomes, though. I'll give you that much.
It was in the range of it, right? It was in the range of outcomes, but don't not to get completely sidetracked, but we probably thought Mahomes. That was in the range of outcomes. Kirk Cousins, that was in the range of outcomes. Dak Prescott, that was in the range of outcomes. So I think it was plus money. It
makes sense.
Yeah.
It was plus money. Nice.
Yeah.
But it was definitely there. So it makes sense. But yeah, where do you stand on JSN? Because there's definitely I'm in the camp of if I have him, I'm just gonna see what I can get for the moment because he is on bye and whatnot. But yeah, man, it's definitely gonna be probably a little tougher to sell JSN at this point because people have kind of probably watched his box. They're constantly looking at the box scores and all right, he hasn't been doing this all year or whatever, or he did this one time, da. But in terms of Seattle and then pushing the ball consistently, still he could still potentially still be doing that. But what do you say in terms of JSN? Where do you stand on this?
I think it just depends, right? You had some wide receivers get banged up this week. I know we talked about potentially trading for CD, which I think that's still in the range of outcomes, right? You have Olave that got dinged up. You have Drake London who got dinged up as well. So I think there's some opportunities to maybe do a little swipping and swapping, not straight up for those guys, but I think when you swipping and swapping. I think you got that. I think obviously if you're a Keon Coleman owner, that's a possibility. Amari Cooper, AJ Brown. I think there's definitely more than a handful of guys that got dinged up this week. And then just another player that we haven't talked about to be able to trade away or to sell low, I think is MHJ. So you know what I mean? So I think those are all some situations and scenarios where maybe you could package up a JSN and depending on right, I want to talk and think about maybe leagues that maybe you and I aren't involved in, maybe local leagues, home leagues and stuff, where maybe a Chase Brown, maybe he's not out there on the waivers, you know what I mean? But in a 10-team league, who knows, right? So I think you kind of look at some of those scenarios and some of those situations, right? That you might be able to potentially make a move on the positive side. And even dude, I'm just looking I know I'm digressing completely, but dude, Tyreek Hill, the last 3 weeks, wide receiver 40. 40. Right? Yeah, so I think there's an opportunity, and I think there's definitely
just like we drew it.
Oh my God, bro. Don't even. It stresses me out to even think about it.
I don't know how I'm still decently looking good in the Cookout League with Tyreek Hill.
Bro, one of my best team is a draft night out team, and Tyreek Hill was my number 1 pick, and I am 7-1.
Hey, killing it.
Yeah, but I think right, You keep saying that. I'm waiting. But like I think like you look at those type of situations, right? And that's where like I kind of start to look at JSN for like some of those type of owners that like have big time players like that just haven't hit the mark. And so yeah, like I'm definitely in the business of trying to. I have JSN in more than a few leagues to try to see what I can do. In one league, I have JSN, the Bears wide receiving core. Yes, I have Roma Dunze and DJ Moore. Like, don't even ask, like, oh my god, I hate my life. I hated my life so bad in that way. And then I let them weak neighbors as well. But I was just like, oh my god. But like it actually has worked out okay, right? So yeah, I think like when you look at like wide receivers for JSN, like start to look at like those type of caliber receivers that just haven't met the mark, and maybe you can throw him in there, and maybe maybe a mid running back like some of the guys we had mentioned a little bit earlier, and maybe you can get to like a Tyreek Hill, or something like that right there.
Yeah, and these are I definitely love your ideas. How to get creative with this. Because it'll be interesting to see if a manager would do straight up MHJ for Jackson Smith. That'd be interesting.
Yeah, that would be.
Please throw it out there. You know what I'm saying in terms of that goes, but that'd be interesting. Him for Najee Harris straight up is interesting. There's a ton of him.
Why you
straight
keep
up
throwing out my
Jones.
Steelers guys tonight, man? Come in, leave my guys alone, man. We on the upswing.
Don't worry. We'll get there. I'll be talking about some of your guys in a positive way, I'm sure, at some point. But I think Aaron Jones straight up for Jackson Smith and Jigba is interesting as well. So there's a couple one-on-ones you could do. If you have JSN, you just gotta get a little more creative depending on your league. Extra cells on this list. Some of them are familiar, some of them are new. Yeah, like look, Deontay made both lists because like depends on your situation. I know you're gonna say that, but he makes both lists because it's like he is a buy or he is a sell depending on what you're trying to do. Javonte is on this list. Ben said a couple weeks ago he should have got out of there. So I hope people have been listening. Keon Coleman was on here because there was he been on here last week because he had a big game and now he's even more of a sell if you can get anything for him. Pittman's been on this list for a couple weeks. And even with Flacco, he didn't do anything. There's clearly something going on with him.
Yeah, there is, man. I thought maybe this week might have been a nice bounce back spot for him, but
shit's crazy, yo. It's wild. Now Bigsby even there. I told you guys a couple weeks ago, they sure you get rid of Bigsby because now all of a sudden there's a mess in the backfield with ETN in there and then Deandre Johnson and stuff like that. Stevenson's an interesting sell. He almost made the top 3 sells. But sell Stevenson and Reason. I think he could still be a decent back moving forward. It's just more about like you're just not selling him for pennies. You just want to sell him to the point where you're upgrading somewhere or you're getting a better player that you want rest of the season. Anyone you wanted to say or add to the list as well? Anything else you want to say in terms of these guys?
Man, I'm holding, man, on Dre, man. I've been holding on Dre, man, for Ramondre Stevenson for a while. Like I think been a couple times you've been ready to move off of him, but I've been pretty. And I know you just said like not for pennies on the dollar, but like man, I think he's just like he's one of the few backs in the league still, man, that like he gives you something in the passing game. Like he's the best player on offense on a bad team. Like he's like kind of reminds me of like a poor man Steven Jackson a few years ago when he was with the Rams or whatever. Like that's just what it is, right? And I think like I like one of the things I took away from week 9 is like
comparison. I don't know if I go that far. Steven Jackson was he was pretty decent.
Yeah, like right, like physically imposing, right? But like from a numerical metric standpoint, like you're probably getting like the same type of performance from him, man. Like I just like I think Ramondre Stevenson is somebody that like is on the sell list, and I'm a little bit like And I think even Swift, right? Like, yeah, I'm like, I don't know. I think even Swift, right? Like I had mentioned, man, like it's still double-digit points, like for him for sure. Like over the last handful of weeks, man, like he's still been somebody that has been fairly competent when we talk about from a performance standpoint. He's right outside of the running back 2 situation over the last 3 weeks, but like he also had a bye in week 7. So I mean, he's had 18 points and 14 points over the last 2 weeks, even in bad situations. So I think like it's just kind of like a recency bias thing and like something that's burned into our brain from that. But I do agree with like the rest of the guys that like you do have on this list as far as extra sells. Hunt, his time is coming up for sure. Although he
Hunt
had
and
really
Hubbard in the same spot.
Hubbard, his time. Jonathan Brooks, I think, is getting ready to show up. He's getting ready to show up. Jonathan Brooks is this week. So I think like, coming down the stretch, that's the last thing you want is to have a guy that you've been relying on for the last 10 or 11 weeks. And then when you get into weeks 12, 13, and 14, he gives you half the production. So it might be time to get out of that business for sure. So I'm with you on that.
Definitely. And yeah, like you were saying, Stevenson's been killing it back-to-back weeks, but it's only because like, look, I just think that I know Dave looked a little bit better with Jake May under center, but it's more about like still like give me a decent offer. They're trying to sniff around for Stevenson. Like, look, this is what I want for Stevenson. Give me a Jaden Reed. Give me like, somebody, something that's like, again, an upgradable piece for my team overall. Yeah, that's buy low and sell highs.
Love it.
Waiver wire week 10, folks. So you got the pieces potentially available on your waivers. Disclaimer, because all info is predicated on your league size. Ask any questions specifically in what format you're in so we can give you the best possible answer. Just because, again, got to make sure people are giving us great context when it comes to that, and we give it to people.
Should be crazy out there, yo.
Be crazy out in these streets.
That's it. That's it.
These fancy football streets.
That's it.
Quarterbacks that should be owned, and I think they're definitely more. They're definitely on some waivers for sure this week, but they should be owned. Aaron Rodgers this week. He takes on the Cardinals this week, and then Justin Herbert, as well. Like both these guys should be owned. Like Herbert's been looking crazily good these last couple weeks, through the air, especially. It's just like I said when we're talking about Dobbins. Like Chargers have been a team where they've been passing the ball a lot more. The last 3 weeks for Herbert, passing yards, 349 versus Arizona, and a crazy ass loss. 279 against New Orleans, and then 282 last week against Cleveland. Like Herbert is definitely like a QB1 bridge quarterback-ish. If you don't have one of the guys that are constantly scrambling around or getting you rush yards or whatnot, like Herbert's someone you could definitely be starting moving forward. Playoff schedule is a little bit interesting. We talked about that earlier with Tampa Bay, Denver, then New England. But Herbert definitely should be owned. Aaron Rodgers. Look, the Jets, we won't talk about them tonight. But we all know that Devontae Adams is a New York Jet. And those two guys combined, we can always look for Rodgers to continue to look to get him the ball. And obviously when it came to Adams, like he finally had his game where he broke the heck out. In the midst of him going to the locker room with a potential injury, comes back out, scores a touchdown. 7 catches, 91 yards, and a touchdown for Adams. But this correlates with Rodgers because, again, we know that the efficiency like throughout the year hasn't really been there for Aaron Rodgers. But like you're in a position where you need a QB. Like Rodgers can potentially get you there. It just may not be as flashy. But I feel like he still should be owned, potentially be starting in terms of how that goes. But him and Adams together makes a ton of sense. But for the rest of the QBs, Daniel Jones is here. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts about that, John. Knicks, Stafford, Wilson, your guy. Winston, who probably is still going to be out there in the waiver wire for some people, maybe not. But then the deep E. We got Cooper Rush / Trey Lance. Because look,
rolling in the deep end. Yeah.
Literally,
man. Literally rolling in the deep end out there, man.
But I know probably Cooper Rush because he's right now the starter. But look, I really think the Cowgirls are doing a disservice to themselves by not getting Trey Lance out there. I think that's more the fancy side of us talking probably. But I really think like But Trey Lance, former first round pick, like you gotta see if he's still got any talent left. He's been developing there the last 2 years, like
I think that's out the window since they paid Dak. I think that was more of like a super insurance policy on Dak.
Sure.
So like
Yeah,
now
okay.
it's yeah.
It's
So now,
time, right?
yeah. So now it's kind of like all right, like whatever. But I think like too, like kind of the like what we talked about on Sunday. I think Trey Lance is a great example of what we talked about, like quarterbacks that were thrown out there too early. And like you're seeing guys now that are like coming to life, Sam Darnold, that are coming to life that were like high end picks. But from a fantasy perspective, I agree. Like Justin Herbert, actually, man, he's not even a bridge quarterback anymore, man. Last 3 weeks, man, Justin Herbert is actually QB8 over the last 3 weeks. So I think like he definitely holds some value, especially if you're in a situation where like, I hope this person isn't watching. I don't think they are, but like they're in one of my home leagues. They have Anthony Richardson and Jameis Winston. Well, they don't have a quarterback essentially because Jameis Winston is on bye and Anthony Richardson isn't the starter. So like Justin Herbert would absolutely make like a shit ton of sense to go get. And that's like funny. you asked me like what I thought about like Danny Dimes, man. Like I don't even want to say it. I don't want to be that guy, but like I literally had him in one of my DFS lineups, man, like last week, and I was like, man, nah, dude. I was like, that's dumb. I was like, why would I play Tyrone Tracy and Danny Dimes, like 2 giants? Like, what am I thinking about right now? But I think like Danny Dimes is always going to give you the sneaky upside, right? From the rushing aspect of things for sure. And
it's Carolina this week. Against Carolina this week.
Man, shit now. I might have to reconsider. You know what I'm saying? But also too, like they're in games where like they're typically like game script, they're typically trailing. So he's gonna have to be throwing the football. Bo Nix, obviously last week, man, everybody, in the fantasy world was kind of clamoring over the fact that he was a top 10 quarterback.
And that's why he failed.
Yeah. Bro, listen, man. I am AFC North through and through. And I knew the moment everybody was like, oh, man, it's a top 10 quarterback. Against, like, the receivers still did their thing. And, like, Bo Nix still actually had, like, a respectable day in the grand scheme of things. Like, he gave you 17 points in a PPR format, right? Like, because of, like, that weird play where Cortland Sutton threw the touchdown. But, like, he still gave you a solid day at the office. So Russ Wilson, man, like I said, like I totally am, not because I'm a Steelers fan, but just because like of the way things have been shaken out. Like I talked about, like they still see the Ravens twice. They're going to see the Chiefs. They're going to see the Eagles. They're going to see the Bengals. They're going to see the Browns, right? Like those are all games where like points can and will be scored in those games. So like I think Russ could be sneaky coming down the stretch. For sure. And Matt Stafford, he's got all of his weapons back, man. And like Matt Stafford was a guy that like in the summertime, like we were talking about, all right, like, like if you punt the quarterback position and you end up with Matt Stafford, like, you could definitely do like a hell of a lot worse, like with that. And I mean, he had 25 points in week 8, almost 19 in week 9. So like, I feel good about where we're at with that, like with him. And then like, Cooper Rush and Trey Lance, man, like I said, like it'll be interesting to see who ends up coming out of that situation. Mike McCarthy, that guy sucks. Just calling it like I said, man. He sucks. He's terrible. But like his offenses are like they are in a really weird situation because their running game sucks, their defense sucks. Now they have a backup quarterback. Your best player potentially is on the fringe as far as playing. So what the hell do you do? Like, so I think
trade for Jonathan Mingo, which they did today.
Oh my God, bro. Oh my God. Like I can't even like, and the funniest part, like I'm just gonna rant for like 2 or 3 minutes. Like the funniest part to me about this is that they're probably going to end up sucking so bad that they're actually going to be potentially in the tanking for Shador or tanking for Jalen Milroe situation. And they're not even going to be able to draft him because they just paid Dak Prescott fucking $200 million bazillion. So like,
Oh boy.
Dallas can't even get it right when they try to get it wrong.
Make it
Meanwhile,
make
yeah. So yeah, that's it. I'm done.
make it make sense. Idiots.
That's it.
But yeah, I mean, look, look, Cooper Rush, I mean, is only really for super flex leagues, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
for sure.
But I mean, that's just kind of where it's at. Because super flex leagues are all over the place. QBs. But honestly, I just don't mind if you need to start. If you need a QB this week, you need to start someone. I do not mind you starting Daniel Jones this week.
No,
Because it's just Carolina's giving up fourth most fantasy performances of QBs all year.
bro, they give up the most to everybody. Like you don't even have to go there.
Yeah.
Fantasy QB, fantasy running back, fantasy wide receiver, fantasy kicker, fantasy tight end, fantasy offensive line. They've given it all up, man. Yeah,
second to last team, and expected points per allowed. So it's just it's a lot. It's a lot going there. Running backs. We go to running backs. Running backs that should be owned. Ray Davis, your guy. Should definitely be be owned on most rosters. Garendo should still be owned until we get news about CMC officially coming back. And that's also for Jordan Mason as well. Because I see people dropping Garendo like crazy and Mason, and then we don't know what's happening with CMC just yet. Like, I know he's going to be practicing hopefully this week and getting his bearings back and all that, but anytime you hear the word chronic and then you hear, the Achilles and stuff like that, nah, I don't know. I'm not going to say if you have CMC, you get up there and you put him in your lineup right away and find out what happens, but it's still like, I don't know. Algier should definitely be owned still. I know, like, with bye weeks coming up and everything, like, he still should be owned. Braylon Allen should definitely be owned. And then Jalen Wright should be owned as well. Shout out to
UT.
Terrible. Have another beer.
No, I didn't. I wasn't sure if this was like your Dolphins plug or what, but
no, it wasn't. It really wasn't.
No, but I'll jump in real quick on it though, man. Like, I think like with Raheem Mostert back, like I'm not like quite where I was like with Jalen Wright. I think like if Mostert was out, then I would definitely feel a lot better. I know there was coach speak about Jalen Wright being more involved, but I just think like that's just what it is. I think it's just coach speak at this point. I think that could be something you could see. We're going into week 10. I think that could be something you could see a little bit later on because like obviously it's scary hours with Achane into the fantasy playoffs because if the Dolphins are that bad, like you obviously want to preserve your best player so that Jalen Wright might be like a playoff play as opposed to like over the next 2 to 3 weeks kind of play. So that's kind of my take.
That's possible. I could see that for sure. But I could also see where it's like we're just trying to get some momentum for next year, and HN's still our guy. And he's still young, so throw him
could be.
But Raheem Mostert's old. We don't want him to break bones.
Facts.
That's how that goes. But these are running backs that should be owned. Should be owned already. Running back looking a little weird this week. There's just not a lot out there overall in terms of running backs about picking somebody up. Jaylen Warren was a guy I sneakily picked up on Monday night in some of my leagues.
Yeah.
If I didn't have him already, I just think Jaylen Warren is a guy that should definitely not be on waivers right now. I know you had the bye week and all that. You probably had to make some tough decisions, but Jaylen Warren, literally one of those running backs that can all of a sudden find himself a lot more into a split with Najee Harris, especially in game scripts where Pittsburgh's going to have to keep on throwing the football. Especially for your full point PPR leagues, Jaylen Warren can be one of those guys where you could potentially start, especially if you're in a pinch due to injuries or just not, fielding enough trade offers in your league. But I digress on that. Vidal should be owned because we talked about Dobbins. One thing that happens to him, Vidal becomes the full workhorse guy. There's talk about Gus Edwards, but I don't know I'm not sure if he's going to be back to really influence things. But if he's out there on waiver wires, especially if you're a deeper format, Gus Edwards could definitely be stashed as well at the moment. Khalil Herbert, who I talked about this morning, getting traded to Cincinnati. Pretty much insurance for Zach Moss because he's on he's done for the year with a neck injury. At least for the regular season, I should say, which is our fantasy season. So,
The only season that matters for us.
You know what I'm saying? The only season that matters for us. But Khalil Herbert should be just picked up as a guy that could be potentially. They said he could potentially play on Thursday, which is interesting. But he's pretty much a split. The split backfield at the moment with Chase Brown. I mean, he's still the guy in that backfield, but I think Khalil Herbert can still be picked up and just find out what he has with the new regime in Cincinnati. And, they didn't trade much for him. So,
No.
But I think he can still be utilized. Estime for Denver, there's a lot of talk about him in terms of how
getting more usage,
getting more usage and so to speak from Sean Payton, earned a little bit more trust with him. I guess that Denver backfield is so like it's just like
it's classic
backfield.
It's classic Sean Payton, bro. Like I've said it all year long. It's classic Sean Payton. Like he plays a lot of players in those skill positions, and unless you are head and shoulders above everybody else, and even then, like he's still going to rotate guys head and shoulders. He's still going to rotate players in, man. So head and shoulders. That's right.
God, but yeah, I mean, estimate can be factored in. But again, this is Corum. You got Benson, who should already be stashed in most cases, and then Keaton Mitchell should also be stashed because if you have IR spots in your league, you should definitely been stashed. Potentially, he might play this upcoming Thursday. But in terms of the rest of these guys, anyone we missed? Is there anyone you want to dive in deeper with?
No, man. I think like we already kind of hit on it, man. Like obviously, like I'm a big Ray Davis fan, like have been. Like I was in a league where I had to drop him, man, and it pissed me off because the benches are so short, and I hate it. I hate it, dude. I hate it. But like also too, like he's not getting enough volume. He's just been making big plays. So there's that. And then as far as like the running backs I see here, like obviously for me, Jaylen Warren is the one that like that hits for me just because I think like he's just now kind of starting to get rolling for sure. And I think when you think about, where the Steelers are at and what it is that they have going on, like they're obviously going to have to work him into the offense, but he's starting to get healthy. They just had the bye. So I expect to see him kind of his usage kind of see an uptick. And again, man, like I think I can't remember what it was that I read, but it was something I was reading. It was talking about how he was like head and shoulders above everybody, like the best pass protector on the team. So obviously we all know like that's a great way to get on the field. So him, I think Khalil Herbert, man, I think he's pretty interesting just because like he's going to carry the ball, man. Chase Brown is not going to get like 100% of the work, but Chase Brown has gotten a lot of work over the last handful of weeks. But I just think like just for them to like acclimate him into like early down usage, if they have a lead and things like that right there, that's what I'm kind of looking at. And Audric Estime was somebody that I really loved a lot during the summer. He looked really good when he was at Notre Dame. So I'm just curious just to kind of see how this shakes out because I still think Javonte Williams obviously is still a thing. Jaleel McLaughlin is still a thing. So, and then your boy Trey Benson, man, like I know you were a pretty big fan of his during the summer. And he got in a little bit, and James Conner looked like at one point in time last week, man, he took a big hit on the sidelines going towards the end zone, and it looked like maybe he might have been out. So I think those are absolutely great stashes, and running back is what it is, man. Like it's a week in, week out kind of deal with that position, and you could, be staring down the barrel of an RB1 by just stashing one of these guys, and we want to put you in the best position to be looking at that coming down the stretch for the playoff run.
Yeah. Makes a ton of sense. I already been stashing Trey Benson in some of my leagues already because, Connor, hopefully, your boy Connor, I don't know.
Bro, he'll be all right, man.
He's been good.
Yeah, he'll be all right, man. He'll be all right.
We'll see. I don't know. But everybody got a touchdown except for Connor this past week.
Man, but he's still, even still, bro, like he's still one of the top, top 12, top 15 running backs, and like probably where you got him at, man, where you drafted him at, like RB12 and stuff. Like, bro, it's all good, man. He's gonna get you double-digit points every single week, and like, the Cards, man, they want to run the ball, so like, and he can still do a little bit in the passing game, man. So like, and here's the other thing too, man. It's like the Cards, like obviously the division is so tight, man. Like they still got something to play for.
Totally. And the Cardinals lead the division right now. NFC West division right now. It's crazy. Receivers that should be owned. Josh Downs should still be owned. Tillman definitely should be owned. Definitely Juwan Jennings.
Shout out you too. There you go.
Juwan Jennings.
Shout out
definitely
UT.
should be owned. If he's somewhere on the waiver wire, you better
shout out UT again, baby. Shout out UT.
Double dose. Saw that I did that for you.
Yeah.
Leggett, Tolbert should be owned as well because he should have been on already because he was already like operating as like the wide receiver 2 in this offense for Dallas. I know it's not like the prettiest spot, but he still should be owned for sure. The other receivers that we got here, we talked about Jennings, Pearsall. Pearsall belongs in the conversation. Another guy I was sneakily picking up, because Pittsburgh and San Francisco were on by, was easily picking him up. In terms of Pearsall, at least Jennings is probably owned in most leagues. Quentin Johnston is on this list.
He's back.
DeMarcus Robinson back on this list.
Oh my God, dude!
You know what I'm saying,
I played DeMarcus Johnson like 2 weeks ago, man, in the DFS.
Don't get me started. We all have the story. We all have the story.
Like, oh my God, man!
He's just one of those guys that he needs Cooper Kupp.
Oh my God!
He needs a Puka or a Kupp. You know what I'm saying? He needs potentially one or both of those guys to really be relevant. He's just one of those receivers, unfortunately. Because we were, I was drafting him constantly as like last pick of my drafts and draft, on season, best ball leagues and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, he finally got the opportunity to start, and then he doesn't do shit. But then when Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, all of a sudden, he's left open because everybody's so worried about those two guys. It's just
figure.
Go figure, right? Your newly acquired receiver for the Pittsburgh Steelers, Mike Williams, on this list.
Yes, sir.
He was probably left for dead for most people. So he's probably widely available on waiver wire.
Yeah, bro. You can definitely get him. No
Christian Watson's going to be out there. He's on bye. He's still someone that should be stashed. Demario Douglas, who I've called since earlier in this, early on, that he was going to be the wide receiver 1 in New England, and he's been proving that. Here too are some interesting names. I dropped McMillan down a little bit because of the injury and the bye week coming up as well. But if you want to see if he has any juice this week, if he's playing with the hamstring injury this week, cool. But if not, he kind of gets dropped down because then they get to bye. Then Mike Evans should be back. So Westbrook Akine is on this list for Tennessee because they finally have a competent QB, and it's not Will Levis, it's Mason Rudolph. We got
Mace.
Hold. He's what?
Hey man, I'm here for it.
And then Matt Collins, because that's for deeper formats, because him and Josh Allen have had a connection since training.
Yes, sir.
And every once in a while, Matt Collins just shows up randomly out of it, gets a touchdown, whatever. He's not someone I would probably run to go grab, but he's going to be available after the waivers are cleared. And if you're a deeper format and need a receiver, makes sense to try to see if you could grab Matt Collins. But yeah, who stands out here?
The guys that stand out for me are the 49ers wide receivers. Jennings and Pearsall, they definitely stand out. Quentin Johnson stands out because I always have this saying, man, like if you believe in the quarterback, you have to believe in the wide receiver. And even if you believe in the wide receiver, you have to believe in the quarterback in some aspect. I think Josh Palmer's a name that probably should be on here that probably isn't on here as well.
You think so?
Well, I mean,
for him.
Yeah. Well, other than the fact that he's from UT, and we believe in Justin Herbert.
I did not know that.
Yes. We everywhere, baby. We everywhere. We everywhere.
Make a case for Palmer. I'm interested to see this.
I think if you believe in the fact that this offense is going to open up now. Yeah. And I'm pretty sure the last handful of games with them is Tennessee, Cincinnati. Okay, so this is my case. Cincinnati, Baltimore, Atlanta, all offenses that are explosive, and those are all shootout situations. So if they're all potential shootout situations, then you got to believe that all these receivers are going to be on the field for sure in some capacity. And I'm okay with having Josh Palmer coming down the stretch with Mageddon and things like that as well. So I think he's somebody that you could make a case, right, that he could be the guy, because the problem with the Chargers is after Lod McConkey, we don't know we don't know who the other guy is going to be, and it could be Quentin
Yeah.
Johnson, it could be Josh Palmer. So that's my only case, is that it could be either one of those guys.
That's fair.
So I like that. I like like I said, man. Listen, hold wait a minute, let me do it. Mine's I really get my like that guy. Like I was really hoping.
South Carolina,
Man, bro, I literally in Tennessee. I remember I met one guy from South Carolina one time, and I was like, oh my god. I was like, bro, like they made people from Tennessee sound like Northerners did. Xavier Legette, man, like I love that guy. I was hoping the Steelers would have had a crack at him in the draft, but like I think it's kind of starting to become more clear and clear that like he's the number one wide receiver now. And then Mike Williams, it'll be interesting to see, man. Obviously, I'm going to be optimistic as a Steelers fan, but I still think he just wasn't getting enough run. And I think he's going to be able to get that with Pittsburgh. And I think too, man, like it's amazing what a change of scenery will do. And Mike Tomlin, what he's able to do for players. So, and that coaching staff. And then my boy Christian Watson, I can't throw in the white flag yet, man. The towel, I can't throw in the towel on him yet. So I think, yeah, he's definitely a stash. So really, like I said, it's a pair. It's pairs for me. It's the 49ers pair, the Chargers pair, and then Xavier Legette and Mike Williams, because like Christian Watson, I've had him stashed already.
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, look, some of these guys are just interesting names, and the bye weeks are coming, so it's like some of these guys got to play hero for you.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Even the teams that we so-called are calling trash, we got to look at their wide receiver twos and see if they can bring anything for us while we have bye week fill-in. So tis the season. Tight ends, which has been a very interesting thing all year long. We said Gesicki, you know what I'm saying? We said Otten, we said Hill. These guys have been gold for you guys, so shout out to both of us for sure. We put them on the list, we put them on the map. Sanders, obviously the name I'm sure we both want to talk about because we've been on Sanders since the preseason. The specimen out of Texas. I think as the season rolls along, still later parts of the year, I really think Sanders could be one of those tight ends we talk about as like that just explodes on the scene still. Like started I think like really like a couple weeks ago. But now, like, even this past game where Carolina won, he had 4 catches for 87 yards. Yep. I was like, thank you. You're finally using him. Like, it took you guys too long to utilize him, honestly. Like, they were throwing freaking
Tommy
Tremble out there and,
bad business. G. Rose.
But the other side, Jonathan Smith's on this list. He's looked productive. He's been getting a lot. He's been having at least 5 targets the last 3 games. Theo Johnson, because if the Giants are going to be, in the realm of like, maybe making a little bit of noise, something like that. But we talked about the Giants already. They have a favorable schedule for all the positions moving forward. So Theo Johnson could be one of those guys that, percolates a little bit. But in terms of this list, I mean, like I said, like Gesicki, obviously, if he still should be out, like if he's still in a lot of waiver wires, he probably is a good claim to put in because here in T. Higgins didn't practice again, and they play on Thursday. And I think what we've seen a correlation pattern where with Higgins not playing the last couple of weeks, Cincinnati has moved Gesicki more into the seam, and they've allowed Burrow to let torch teams, and that's why Gesicki's been having success. Also, Eric All, he's had injuries, towards ACL, backup tight end. But Drew Sample will also get out there and stuff too. So Cincinnati is still a little weird team, but at least we know with Gesicki, like he'll have a prominent role. His target share goes from like a 6 to 8% target share to almost 20% without Higgins. So that's someone that, if he's out there on the waivers still, you want to grab. Otten, same thing. Like his route participation we talked about, when we talked about it last week, like has always been there. It's just now without Evans, without Godwin for the moment, he's been the guy shining. So and then Taysom Hill, your ultimate Swiss Army knife.
God,
you know what I'm saying? And I have him in the cookout league, and I was so fired up and excited to pick him up a couple weeks back, and I was glad I hung on to him because they have Saints have no RB2 now.
No.
Like And then no Olave now because he has a concussion now again. Like he probably gonna be out another couple weeks. He'll probably be out to the bye week. So, Saints are falling down left and right. Taysom Hill ready to deliver. Whew, I'm excited. Go ahead, Johnny. What you got to say?
Yeah, no, I hate everything about you. What you said about the cookout.
Come
No.
on. Oh yeah, I know. Sorry,
yeah.
sore spot for you. Sorry.
Yeah, man. K Dot, man, is really that's really like my primary focus is K Dot, and just because he's been the tight end one over the last 3 weeks, so I look at him. Hunter Henry is somebody else too that like I'm buying stock in as well, man. Like I just think, like I said, like I'm in on Drake May, tight end 14 over the last handful of weeks, for sure. And then Jatavion, right? Like Jatavion is somebody that I think we all are in agreement on that. Like has a lot of upside for sure. If you're in any keeper leagues or dynasty leagues, obviously, like he's definitely somebody. Gesicki, I think, is really, really only relevant for like the next handful of weeks, right? Because I would imagine probably if the Cincinnati Bengals start winning games, then T. Higgins is mysteriously going to get healthy. So like if that's the case, then obviously that kind of takes away from Gesicki, but. And then Jonnu Smith, I think he's like a dark horse, like in all of this, right? Like with Tua being back on the field. But for me, like I said, 100% K Dot and Taysom Hill. Like, yeah, I subscribe to that. Then Hunter Henry and then Sanders and Jonnu Smith are kind of my plays that I like.
Fair enough, my guy. Fair enough. All right. Gonna drop into streaming defenses for the upcoming week. There's a couple options. In terms of waiver wires for your overall defenses. So first one that comes to mind is pretty much the Bears because they've been great real life all year long. Might not be available in some of your leagues, so just double check that. But Chicago gets New England, and they're at home this time around. So in terms of this defense, we know they're a defense that can definitely force some turnovers and can get after the quarterback. So bad news for Drake May because, again, this is a home game for Chicago. And it's probably a get-right spot for them as well after they've just looked really terrible. They allowed 27 points to the Cardinals, but honestly, like it's because that offense was just putting them in bad situations. Chicago still ranks top 10 when it comes to pressure rate and overall pass rush win rate for Chicago. So they're definitely a great defense to have for week 10. Like we said, you can force the turnovers, get some sacks overall for Chicago. The Giants, talked about them earlier, playing the Panthers. So take that for what you will. The Giants have been a decent, a real life defense all year long.
Yeah.
They just, they're a little bit more healthier now with Brian Burns back. He wasn't there a couple weeks ago. Dexter Lawrence still in the middle, so these guys can still get after quarterback. They're first in sacks on the year. So yeah, the Giants are definitely in play. Especially for a lower scoring outcome that gets some sacks on the back end. Potentially pitch a shutout, maybe.
Yeah. It could be that.
Definitely possible.
Definitely.
And then the Falcons, simply put, they're playing the Saints and they're pretty much coming in limping. Like I said earlier, it's like no Olave now.
Yeah, these are games that when the changes happen, crazy shit be happening. So I would put an asterisk out there, like with the Falcons and Saints, just because the coaching change. We've seen teams kind of play over their head in those situations, but obviously the Olave situation, I think is something to monitor for sure.
I just know if you're streaming defenses, sometimes this week it's a little ugly for streaming defenses. Honestly, the other defenses that I didn't put on here because they're more like highly owned in some leagues, but if the Buffalo Bills are somewhat still out there, please hop on that. I see them in a couple of leagues. The Jets are even out there; might be an option to grab. But I mean, other than that, like those are some of the teams that I saw that were more widely available. But there's definitely some underrated defenses still out there, depending on your league size. What you got to say about these defenses, Johnny? Overall, was there anyone in particular you wanted to mention for this week?
No, like I said, like I mentioned my piece with the Falcons. I still think they'll be okay, but I would just say, like, just with an asterisk, just be aware of coaching
Yeah.
change, right? Like we've seen it already with Cleveland in the Baltimore game, right? Like we've already seen that kind of happen.
Yep.
The Giants have been a tough defense like all year long. So like I definitely wouldn't be shocked with that. And the Bears have played people tough. Again, like so these are two, or actually three tough defenses here that are available that we're talking about. The Bills, they beat up on lesser competition. Let's just call it what it is. That's their calling card, right? So, like, if they're playing against lesser competition, you're probably going to get an elite performance from them. So,
fair enough. Oh boy. Well, any final thoughts, Johnny? What you got?
No, like I think I've pretty much said everything like I wanted to say tonight, man. Like my final thoughts right are like, hey man, just be aware, obviously, of your trade deadlines for sure. Pay attention to people that have injured players. If you're looking to make moves, we've given you guys a lot of really good information tonight as far as like players like to trade for, situations to look for, bye weeks, those type of things, right? Like defenses to stream. So yeah, man, like just appreciate everybody's love tonight here on this election night. Thank you for everyone that has tuned in, and yeah, man, like look forward to seeing you guys on Sunday.
Yes, sir. Because the next time you'll see us is Sunday, 10:30 a.m. Eastern.
Sunday.
That sounds like a mattress commercial.
Well, can't get any copyright infringement on that one.
Can't on that. Week 10 picks, bets, and props show. And any last minute start set questions you guys got as well, feel free to come on into the chat and let us know about it. If you guys aren't following us on Twitter, please do so. The hashtags are right below us. If you haven't liked and subscribed, you are a DICK. If you are not
subscribed, I got aggressive, right? I'm the one who's out here being aggressive tonight, and then he turned it. Love it. I love that. Oh boy, I love it. A little bit. And then sneak preview for the Nick Prop Shop. Nick Prop Shop is 58% on the year. Got a lot better. You know what I'm saying? This past week went 9-2 on the props. This past week, stupid Elijah Moore and 1 yard more for Coker after he didn't have anything second half. Jalen Coker. I told you.
Elijah Moore was one catch away. Well, Elijah Moore was one catch away, and they were playing catch up, which is a little surprising, but it is what it is. Sometimes, don't worry. We'll get that 100% day soon enough. We'll get this baby up a little bit even more. So, but that being said, the next show is on Sunday, 10:30 a.m. Eastern. Feel free to come check us out. For myself, for Johnny, we'll see you guys on Sunday. Peace.